Okay, let's see where we are. I think eighth time's the charm, and we're good to go. Um, all right, let me kick open Postgres, and let's get started. Oops. Go connect to server. Here we go. Like I said, eighth time's the charm this morning. So anyway, all right. So let's go take a look at the stable reference. All right, so what's a stable reference? A stable reference is the thing that we send to the outside world to allow us to permalink into, or create a permanent link into an item. So we can pass around a bookmark of something, right? But we don't want to tie it to our internal representation of an ID. So I don't want to just spit out the ID that I have attached to a record. I want to send out something that I indicate is for public consumption and then map it to an internal ID. So I can change my underlying representation and my stable reference could still be perfectly valid. Think of it as just as we separate the layers in our application so we don't have everything just up in the one webhook layer. We want to be able to separate the internal representation of something from the external representation of something so they can move independently of each other. All right. So let's start looking at what we want in a stable reference. And now we're going to go look at the data layer. So let's go file. We'll call, so the stable reference is going to be the stable reference is going to be generated from something that's internal, that is an identifier for the different for the different entities in the system. I'm not sure what name to give it, but let's start with so stable reference is the thing in my model, but that's not necessarily a data representation of it. The stable reference data representation is a system is a published identifier. I don't love that name. I may come back to it. Okay, let's add published identifier. So this is in the data package. And thinking about it, so I think the fields I want are some, we want some sort of system generated ID. That's the ID of our thing. Then we want published entity. Let's make this a string. and published entity. I think published entity should be the name. Published. I think that should be the name. Okay, so let's change this to published entity. And we can use this as name, identifier. And we'll make that a string. All right. Let's talk a little bit about this. So is it's a data entity that is published outside the system. The e.g. That is the primary key value of the table. And published. Okay. Here's what I don't like about this. What I don't like about this is this. I feel like maybe this should be I almost feel like we should have something like type base key, and this should be and then this should be key. Right? I still don't like it because the details of the key are public. So maybe we need to do this so we can pass in and out a database key without people coming to depend on the contents of that key. So let's think a little bit about how this would work. So so the service queries a bunch of items. So we've queried a bunch of images. We then go back to the model and say, for these images, give me a set of stable references. The model, in turn, so let's go take a look at the image searcher. The model, in turn, so really the model is returning back an image. It has the internal ID of the image, so we can go back and select metadata. So we know at this layer what the IDs are, so we can go ahead back into this layer and say okay, so let's fix that comment. As the externally referenced token for this entity. Okay, so we have generate. Well, we're not always generating. Sometimes we're finding them. So let's start with find. So let's do a search. So let's type published entity service. That's an interface. And so what should this do? So we should have a function that is a find identifiers. And for now we will say So given a published identifier, we should be able to return given a published identifier, we should be able to return the thing itself, right? So we should have a lookup and published ID is a string, and this should return back what? It should return back the thing itself. And possibly an error. So lookup should return the underlying underlying data member. We should probably return its type. For now, handling not found as an error. Okay, so we should probably also have a single create. And that should take an entity name, the ID, and that should return a published entity and possibly an error. Okay. Actually, it's singular, so it's really datum. Okay. So that's lookup and create. Then we need basically batch versions of these, right? So we need put it over here. So we need a batch version of lookup. What should a batch version of lookup? Lookup all? And this returns back no, this isn't right. So if I do lookup all, I get back for each one either the thing I get back the thing itself, the name of the entity, and possibly no. Here's what we want. We want we want to wrap this because this should be able to return error, which is did this work at all? But some of these may be missing. So lookup result is struct and searched for string, found Okay, I like this. That's very fluent, or not fluent, but so search for contains the value, the published identifier that was searched. Found is the value found in the database. Of type indicates the type of data found, and with error indicates an error finding that value. Okay. So this now becomes and this becomes right. Okay, I like that better. And so the batch version of this is create all Here's a question I have. Does equality work across hidden fields? I don't know. Let's think about this one. So create all takes and returns back so entities, their IDs. It creates the entity elements, returns those. All right, so we've got this. So what if one failed? What if one of these failed? What if one of these failed? Does this need to occur? Let's just do this for now. Let's do that for now. So let's think. We've got lookup all. Published. All right, so we've got lookup all, create all. Should we have a find? And a find is given type, entity type, and ID. This should return back published entity find all, likewise, so entity type find a specific entity, it's published. Find a specific published ID for a given entity. Okay, that makes sense. Find all returns all the published for a given set of Okay, so we've got lookup, which takes the published ID and returns back the thing that we want, the underlying thing. Create takes things and generates published entity information. Find takes the underlying thing and returns back its published entity. And find all does the same thing in batch. Okay, so now this is the thing find or create. So this one does a find or create. So it looks up, it tries, okay, find or create, attempts to find the published entity formation for a given database entity, if there is no published entity information, it creates it. Now, as you can guess, find or create all there. Create the published Okay, so that returns back this published entity, which could be an error. So let's say, for example, we have 10 things. 3 of them are fine, and 7 error. At that point, we may want to roll back the transaction, but I don't know that this is the layer to do it in yet, because this, remember, takes a passed in. This would take a passed in database connection, and it's up to the thing that passed in the database connection to make the determination as to whether or not we want to go ahead and roll back the transaction or not. So it really isn't our call at this point to roll back the transaction. And so we have here is a type DB. Well, let's make sure we're symmetric with, say, for example, DB published entity. And let's maintain. So DB caller. And making sure we continue to have parity or func. Again, the reason I want this to line up is principle of least surprise with an API. The underlying idea is that when you do something in an API and people come to see a pattern, they should be able to rely on that pattern. So even if they've never looked at this functionality, if they've used, for example, metadata, they should expect a new published entity server function will return back a published entity service. Return and this is going to give me grief because this doesn't implement all these functions. going to do it the easy way. Take out the comments. And so this is going to return back an empty lookup result and an errors new. Oh, it didn't automatically bring it in. Bummer. Okay, wait a minute. Option Shift Return. There we go. Awesome. Okay. Intern. Oops. Whoop. Awesome. Okay, so this should now be a perfectly legit file. Yes, it is. It is perfectly legit. We got some warnings. What are my unused function, unused parameter? Okay, just the stuff I expect because it's not implemented. Okay. All right, so there's my to-do list. So let's start by creating the test, the test file. So published entity test. Oops. Published entity test. There we go. All right. Oh, a bunch of unused. Okay. Oh, test DB caller. So let's go up to the top of the file and take a look at test DB caller. Well, yeah, so I introduced a whole concept without putting it in my test. That is bad. That's bad. So what does begin? Oh. There we go. Now that's happy. Now this should be happy. This is now happy. Add. Okay. So that's happy. Let's just make sure all these tests are happy. Okay. Well, it's getting to be that time. I think that's enough for today. Kind of a short one because I got a little stuck with OBS on my way in, but let's take a look at where we are. So we have as our, well, actually, let's go ahead and implement the tests. This should be this should be that. Okay. So in each of these we can and we could just do this. And that is my to-do, right? Awesome. Okay. All right, so this gives me basically what, so if I ran a published entity test, it's going to take a little bit. Yep, all those fail. And those are the only things that are failing. Okay. All right, well, this is a good point to stop then. So I need to look at implementing all of these. And once I have that, I'll be able to implement my stable reference model. Once I'm able to implement my stable reference model, I'm able to go back to this image searcher and return back a set of things, a set of stable references to things that I would want to publish to the outside world. Oh, getting there. Yeah, okay. So I'm just going to go ahead and commit all my changes. So what are we looking at here? We're looking at DB wrapper test. Yes, that is to fix the tests. Published entity, stable reference. Yep. To associate an identifier. Excuse me. Okay. All right.